Hello and welcome to Budget Watch Collector. Today I've got a watch review for you which could be the ultimate budget diver. It's the SKX009. So before we get stuck into the review of this Seiko SKX009, I want to quickly just talk about Seiko, the company generally. Seiko is a brand that is synonymous with watchmaking. They've been manufacturing watches since the 1920s, and throughout that time they've made some incredible pieces and some icons, including this one here, the Seiko SKX009. And they've also pioneered some of the most disruptive technology in the industry, including quartz and also mechanical quartz through their kinetic line. The name Seiko, or the word Seiko, actually is a Japanese word which can mean either exquisite or success. Now, interestingly, I would argue that this isn't the most exquisite watch that Seiko make, for sure. The Grand Seikos are probably taking that crown, but it might be one of their more successful watches. The Seiko SKX range has become synonymous with quality, budget, affordable dive watches, and this example, the 009, can be picked up second-hand in very good condition for an affordable price. The Seiko SKX007 is exactly the same in every way apart from it's black. The dial will be black and the bezel will be black. So before we get into the details of this specific example of a dive watch, I want to talk about some of the features that make up most dive watches and how you can tell a dive watch if you're new to watches and you aren't quite sure what you're looking for. Dive watches have become one of the most easily recognisable styles of watch. Pioneered and made famous by watches such as the Rolex Submariner, the diver has really become more of an everyday, casual, wearable piece rather than a truly functional watch for divers. The watches were first manufactured for people who were spending time underwater, and it required a certain amount of quality and a certain amount of usability to enable the likes of divers to be able to use them and accurately tell the time and also count minutes whilst they were underwater. I can't imagine there's many people diving professionally in this day and age who actually still wear these watches. I think this is more your holiday maker at the beach as well as casual daily wear. However, despite no longer being used primarily for diving, these watches have maintained some of the classic characteristics of dive watches, which you can see displayed perfectly here on the SKX009. This includes a simple, easy to read dial. As you can see here, the indices are simple, there are no numbers. We also have clearly legible hands which are contrasted against the dark dial. We have a smooth sweeping second hand with a lollipop counterweight, and we also have a relatively clear day-date complication. The bezel, as you can see here, has got minute markings. Each 5 minutes is marked by a baguette, and also the 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50 are marked by Arabic numerals. The bezel is designed in a unidirectional sense that it can turn one way only and can be seen to rotate completely 360 degrees. This bezel actually has quite a nice click. It has 120 clicks, which I'll be able to, if I hold it close to the microphone, you'll be able to hear here. This is a very accurate, nice and precise bezel which has got a really nice movement. The purpose of the bezel, a lot of people assume it's always to count how much time you've been underwater or how much oxygen you have left in your dive tank, which kind of could be true, but it isn't necessarily the idea. The idea is just to be able to count time. So if you think, if you're diving and you know that you're diving at the time now is 20 past 4. 20 past 4 is a difficult thing to remember if you're busy, you're diving, you're trying to track your oxygen, you're trying to see whatever you're trying to see down there. So actually, an easier way to track the time is simply by rotating the bezel and using the minute markers on the bezel itself. So by rotating the pip here, which we can see, to align with the minute hand, this now enables me to count minutes from this point onwards. Meaning, if I was to look at the bezel and it says this, I know I've been doing whatever I've been doing for 11 minutes. Now, I actually use this in day-to-day life. It's quite useful having to time speeches, having to time anything in terms of cooking is quite useful. I also like to use it when I'm in the gym, when I'm on a run. You can literally say, okay, I want to row for 30 minutes, set the bezel to the minute hand like this, and when I get to here, I know that I've reached my 30-minute target. It's also quite a nice thing to fiddle with, I'll be completely honest, and for anyone who's got a little bit of energy that they like to put into things like fidget spinners, this is the perfect accessory for you. So I want to just show you some of the dimensions of this watch so you can kind of visualize it a little bit better. One feature which is definitely typical of a dive watch is the chunky design. They're often quite thick and generally quite big watches. Now this is definitely part of the appeal. They look really good on the wrist, but it can also be a little bit detrimental to everyday use. For example, if you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, to try and slide a dive watch under the sleeve isn't always the simplest. So let's have a look at the dimensions of the SKX009. So to begin with, we have a thickness of around 13.4 millimeters. We have a lug to lug distance of, let's just see if we can get it, of around 45 millimeters. And in terms of case diameter, we're looking at around 42 millimeters. So this actually is a relatively wearable and not too chunky dive watch. Although it kind of still has that look and feel of a dive watch, you'll notice that the lug to lug length of 45 mil is actually quite short. If we make a quick comparison with another dive watch here, which is the Casio Duro, you can see that it's actually, although not a hugely different watch in size, the actual length of lug you can see is significantly longer. Despite its dimensions, what makes this watch quite wearable is actually it wears quite small on the wrist. So despite it being a 42mm case size or case diameter, the lug to lug of 45 mil is actually quite short, which means it sits on the wrist quite nicely. So something I keep talking about in this review is the quality of the watch. And obviously that's important for any purchase, especially watches which can take a bit of a beating with everyday wear. In terms of materials, this is made of a stainless steel case, which has elements of polish, as you can see around the edges here, but it also has some brushed, very subtly brushed here on the lugs, which you might struggle to see on the camera. The crystal itself is not a sapphire crystal, it's a Hardlex crystal. So Hardlex is a Seiko proprietary type of mineral crystal, which they believe is less likely to crack or break under pressure, which is especially useful underwater, although sapphire crystal is renowned for being more scratch resistant. The SKX009 would typically come with either a metal Jubilee bracelet or a black rubber bracelet, similar to this one here, which you can see on the Casio Duro. However, I've opted for removing that rubber band and adding this third-party navy blue Archer quick release. This was relatively inexpensive from Amazon, and I think it finishes off the watch nicely, but still giving that comfortable sweat resistant, water resistant property that I would like. It also has the quick release function, which I think is incredibly useful on watch straps, especially someone like me who changes them a lot. And as you can see, I can very, very easily and quickly remove this without having to use tools or without spending too long trying to get the bracelet on and off. So in terms of movement, this SKX009 uses the proprietary Seiko S26 movement, which is a renowned class as a workhorse movement. It's a robust movement for sure, but it's also a little bit older now, and it's missing some of the key features that we would like to see on watches, such as hacking, where as you release the crown, the second hand would stop, enabling for more precise synchronization. As you can see, this crown is fully extended here, but the second hand is still sweeping. And it also lacks the ability to hand wind. So this being an automatic watch, it powers itself through the rotor swinging, which winds up the watch itself. A lot of watches have a hand wind function, which is really useful if you haven't worn the watch for a while or it's out of rotation. You can actually take it straight out, wind it a few turns, and we're ready to go. With this watch, if you haven't worn it and it's not working, you have to do the shuffle, which is where you shake the watch like this until you start to see some movement. For someone like me who has a few watches and tends not to wear the same one many days in a row, I find this a little bit annoying, but I don't mind. I do prefer to have a hand wind watch. I think it's a feature that's relatively simple, but just adds a little bit more speed, especially if you're someone who rotates their watches quite a lot. Seiko rate this movement as losing around 10 seconds a day, either gaining or losing, actually, and I'm quite happy with the accuracy. I also don't need super precise timing. Given the fact that I actually wear this rarely, and it means that most days when I wear it I'm having to actually set the time myself, I tend not to be losing too much time over the course of a few days because it runs out of power before the accuracy loses so much time that it actually makes a difference. So the materials are good, the movement itself is robust and very strong. Well, what's also nice about this watch is the water resistance. Now, as you can see on the dial here, it says divers 200 meters. 200 meters refers to the water resistance. With a dive watch, you want it to have a high level of water resistance. And it just means that you can comfortably wear it to go swimming in the sea, and if you were to dive without worrying about it taking in water, cracking, breaking under pressure, and becoming damaged. A nice added bonus of the SKX009 and 007 is that they are ISO certified. So they have the rating of ISO 6425, which means that the watches met some extremely specific criteria. These standards include having a bezel which has at least every 5-minute markers. It has also clearly distinguishable minute markers on the dial, which you can see here. It needs to have adequate visibility from 25 centimeters in pitch black and total darkness. And I'll show you a lume shot later so you can see how the lume performs on this piece. It also needs to have a magnetic resistance, which this does to a high level. It also needs to be shock resistant. Now, as part of the shock resistance testing, they actually hit the watch with a rubber hammer, I think from 2 or 3 directions, to test how it performs under impact. Now, I'm not proud to say that I have actually once dropped this face first onto the bathroom floor, which is a hard floor, and it has survived, and actually luckily the timekeeping ability wasn't hampered in any way. The performance didn't really differ, and as you can see, it looks in still pristine condition after taking what was probably a fall from around 3 feet. So I can personally testify for the shock resistance on this one. The watch is also tested for chemical and saltwater resistance. Now actually, I have been in the sea with this. I've never dived with this watch, but I've swam in the sea with this watch, as well as in pools, and I can safely say that it performs extremely well, and actually underwater its readability and legibility is still excellent. The spring bar strength is also tested on the watches, and they literally apply force to either strap or both straps like this to see how much pressure can be exerted before the spring bars break. Obviously I'm using a third-party strap here with the third-party spring bar, so these will not be as high quality as the originals. As you can see here, we have a screw down case back, which definitely helps with the water resistance, but also gives an opportunity for Seiko to apply this beautiful engraving or embossing here, which you can see just adds an extra touch of class to the watch and also helps with the feeling of quality that this watch just exudes. You have the screw down crown again, which helps with water resistance. To use it, we have to unscrew it first. Now interestingly, the position here is just slightly before 4 o'clock. This actually is a really good position for a crown in many ways, especially for a chunkier watch, as it doesn't dig into the wrist. Often if you're wearing a watch with a crown at 3 o'clock, as you do this action with the wrist, you can actually see that it digs in. Now this, with it being slightly lower, you don't get any of that. And also the crown sits relatively flush with the crown guards, meaning that actually once it is properly screwed in, I'm going to do right now, which means that once it's properly screwed in, it's actually very flush with the case, so you don't really even notice the crown being there most of the time. I actually find with my example specifically, it's sometimes a little tricky to unscrew. Maybe that's just because I screw it too tight, but I like to have it too tight than too slack. But it sometimes can be a little tricky to unscrew. The ISO rating that I mentioned obviously isn't mandatory, and a lot of watch manufacturers will make divers, what they will call dive watches, without passing it. As you can see on the dial, this actually says the word divers, as well as on the case back too. The manufacturers are legally not allowed to sell watches as professional divers watches if they don't meet that ISO certification. So Seiko have really gone above and beyond to ensure that this is a quality product, but also meets the stringent criteria that make it a professional dive watch. You'll see a lot of watch manufacturers will advertise their diver style watches or dive watches, but they can't print on the dial divers. So it really shows that Seiko have gone above and beyond to make sure that this works, will last, and can take a bit of a beating. So in terms of daily use, I think this is a really good size watch. I think the thickness isn't too chunky that it can't fit under a sleeve, and also that lug-to-lug length of 45mm, it's actually a very wearable, usable watch. In terms of colour, obviously the red and blue is a slightly bolder choice. I think if I was going to buy again, I'd be tempted to go for the black SKX007, a little bit more versatile, a bit more classic. But I must admit, when you wear this in the summer or on the beach, it kind of works, and I'm actually quite happy that I've got it with a Pepsi bezel. The lume is really good. Seiko are notorious for having good lume being the glow-in-the-dark functionality of the indices and the hands. The SKX is no different, and this actually has incredible lume, which you'll be able to see on the screen now. I've noticed that in daily wear, especially in England where there's not a lot of direct sunlight and often we're spending quite a lot of time indoors, the lume never really gets a chance to charge, if you like, so therefore the lume isn't that bright overnight. However, recently on a summer holiday I took it and I was wearing it outside all day, And what I found was that the loom lasted through the night, and there was a couple of points where I'd wake up during the night and I'd be able to see the time in the dark because of the quality of the loom. This is a nice to have feature. It's not essential anymore with watches. A lot of the time I don't really check the time during the night, but when you need to, it is quite useful to have such a high quality loom as this one. It's also really nice that it's got the day-date functionality, which actually also has, depending on the model or the country of origin of your Seiko, you might find that it has a different language as well, as you can see here. It's really nice to have that day-date functionality. I use the day-date quite a lot. It's a lot easier than checking the phone. I think it's less rude, and it's just a nice thing to see, and it gives that extra something to the watch. Now, interestingly, the day and date don't change exactly on midnight. It starts to change from just after 11 p.m. and lasts until around 1 o'clock in the morning, so it's quite a long time it takes to change those two. It's not a sudden snap at midnight. So who's this watch for overall? Well, I think any collector who is looking to have a first or another dive watch in the collection, the SKX seems like an obvious route to go. It's very affordable, it's very good quality, and it's become a little bit of an icon, and I actually think it'll probably hold value. Whilst you're not going to make an absolute fortune from this watch in the long term, it will definitely hold value. These are desirable pieces that truly are an icon of dive watches, and have become a bit of a cult watch among collectors. I think this is also a really good watch for travelling, and I've travelled with it a few times. Because of its rubber strap, even the one that comes with it, it's relatively comfortable. The metal ones, the Jubilee bracelets, the metal bracelets, sometimes I find a bit tight, especially in hot weather that you haven't got the room to expand. Whereas on a rubber strap with holes like this, you can actually, knock it up one notch and you've expanded. I found that specifically in hot countries that my wrist would get a little bit bigger just because I'm hot, and I'd wish I had the expandable strap. But yeah, this is a great watch for travellers. It's simple to change. You can actually also use the bezel as a separate time zone if you know what you're doing. I actually think the day-date functionality is really nice. The loom is really nice. It's tough. You can wear it, and it's not too shiny. It's not too showy offy that would make you necessarily a target for pickpockets, although it does look really good on the wrist. So I hope you found some of that information useful. This was the SKX009 from Seiko. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And if you've got any more questions about the Seiko SKX009, stick it in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.